Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Denis Gianoutsos. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos.
Hey, Kerwin, the show here is called Leadership is Changing. So if I say that to you, what does that statement, that title of the show mean to you?
Take it a little bit macro first and then go back to leadership. I'd like to believe that everything is a function of the world we live within. The changes that happen to this world impacts humanity. And however we have seen the zigs and zags of that, I believe the best in humanity rises amidst the tougher times. Leadership shines brighter through darkness and harnesses the human spirit and celebrates progress. So whether it was in terms of the change, whether it was the Me Too movement or environment and sustainability or equality and social justice, we bestow a higher level of expectation beyond success at job one. An elevated level of accountability is the bar that society has set for leadership. Whether in business or nation building, the social contract is not what it used to. Tolerance is now demanded for more meaningful areas of diversity and inclusion rather than tolerance for poor leadership. There are times when I firmly believe we have better tomorrows ahead of us because as a people, humanity, we demand of ourselves and we demand more of our leaders. I can no longer get by with being satisfied at making my goals. Now, I have expectations of myself to be a force for good for my community and progress on advocacy beyond the hashtags. I've heard some other sessions you've had where we talk about authenticity. And I believe that in the arena of authenticity, our actions as leaders is the currency we deal with. On a more personal note, I'm a career first person and I'm motivated by challenge never been done before or where others failed. But that changed as well. I learned to temper my appetite when I had a daughter. She factors into a lot of my career moves, leaving my prior employer, saying no for a move to the US. I want to be a force for good in my work life so I can make her proud. And then hopefully, just hopefully, my actions will be an example for others. So she may grow up in a society that can be more equal. And I've seen myself make specific examples, decisions on, for example, supply chain that I will get to work with. I put a lot more emphasis in bringing in women-led, women-owned businesses into my supply chain. And another example would be how I've actually raised my hand to ask for an initiative to do, I think the industry refers to this as a returnship. So I led the design development and deployment of the returnships project that was focused on individuals, particularly women who've been out of the workforce, whether to care for children or the elderly, and they're trying to find their way back to the workforce. So we did a program like that last year, and we did a pilot in the US and then later on in India. And just early this year, the whole cohort was actually given perm jobs. And that also advances our advocacy in terms of women in tech.
Wow, that's awesome. Good on you. That's great. And I love several things you just said there, in particular the piece about the women in business and so forth just talked about now. But the other piece that you said earlier on, which was around leadership shines best in darkness. And I think the times like COVID, the pandemic, and other things like that's when we send the leaders who are real leaders are going to shine. And the other one you said, which was we demand more of ourselves and our leaders, right? So we demand more of ourselves and our leaders. And then the other one was around authenticity. You said something around there about the currency. Can you just explain that a bit more? So that's the currency that we'll deal with as leaders? What do you mean?
Well, in an environment, social media, everybody gets to post, and whether it's Black Lives Matter or anything else, Me Too before environment stuff, you see a lot of companies, a lot of leaders post stuff just because it's popular. I think society right now, our audience, can see through what's authentic and what's not. So in the arena of authenticity, the winners will be leaders who are able to show not just their hashtags, but actions that advances that advocacy.
Yes, beautiful. So it's not just walking, just talking, it's actually walking the talk. It's actually the action that people take rather than just paying lip service to it. And I love it, Kerwin. Well done. That's excellent. The name of the show is Leadership is Changing. So when I say that term to you, what does that mean for you?
Wow. I think it's funny. The very first thing that came to mind for me is that, yes, it is. When you said leadership is changing, I'm like, yes, it is. And I think our ability to be able to pivot as a leader in the midst of change is the key to our success. That for many folks, and I was like this years ago, decades ago, for me, it was, nope, I am how I am, a very rigid approach. That, what do you mean the circumstances have changed? Let's change the circumstances. I'm not going to pivot. And then reality smacked me in the head, as well as some great teachings and development through folks like John. And I realized very clearly that my ability to pivot as a leader and to lean into the change allows me to actually lead the change and not have the change lead me and my team.
Wow, lean into the change and lead the change rather than having the change lead me. Wow. Hey, team, hey, listeners, we have Deb Ingino who's here with me, and we're talking about leadership is changing on this podcast and lean into the change. I think Deb's been talking about here around the ability to pivot as a leader to help you succeed in the midst of change and to be able to succeed as a leader and lean into change. Listeners, if you're not taking notes, you need to take notes because there's some really good things that Deb was just sharing with us here. So lead into change and lean into the change and then lead the change rather than change leading you.
Yeah. Could I use an example, Dennis?
Yeah, go for it.
So if you think about it, right now we're recording this particular podcast. We're still in the midst of the coronavirus, COVID-19, whatever alias you want to give it, worldwide. And I'm here in New York, and I have seen, certainly in not just here in the United States, but across the globe,
Sure.
that leaders have been challenged since March of this year, March 2020. We're now, July 2020? So leaders have been challenged since March 2020 to find ways to pivot how they're approaching business, how they're even approaching leading their team, because in many countries, people have had to work remotely. That has been the default. So it has been such a great, rich opportunity for us to be able to really practice the art of pivoting. And I hope that all of us are really taking advantage of this opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, Deb, I've seen a lot of people who are actually like the deers in the headlights of a car. They are paralyzed by this, what's going on. Then there are others who are actually stepping up. There are others who are actually taking advantage of using the time. Even if you're in lockdown at home, they use the time to be able to go and set themselves up. And now in this part of the world, we've gone through that and we've come out of lockdown and we're in a stage whereby within our country, we're underway with things. Is it back to normal? No, it's a new normal, as some people are calling it. And you're right. We're seeing those who are stepping up and those who haven't stepped up. And I think those who have really will be big leaders going into the future.
Agreed.
Yeah. And have you seen people, how are you seeing leaders in your part of the world reacting towards what's going on? Are they like what I just said about paralyzed, or are they getting on with things? How are you seeing it?
Yeah, great question. I serve clients in many different countries, but it's been pretty much universal. That it was like initially they were shocked. What does this mean? And how long will the lockdown be for? Oh, 2 weeks? Yeah, no problem. I can tackle 2 weeks. And then as 2 weeks rolled into another 2 weeks and another 3 weeks and so on, you could tell the leaders who were not growing, very easy to see who they were. They exposed themselves because instead of looking into seeing how they could create opportunity out of the challenge, all they see is challenge.
Right. Yep. So instead of creating the opportunity from the challenge, all they're seeing is the challenge.
Exactly. And they're waiting for somebody else to take the challenge away from them. Instead of, again, it goes back to leaders really changing and pivoting. Instead of saying, I'm in control, I'm the leader here, I'm standing up and identifying myself as a leader, I'm going to find a way to change this for myself. I can't change the outside circumstances, but I can change what I do as a result of them.
Nice. Yeah. Excellent. And so a lot of this, what's happening is out of our control. But what you're saying, Deb, is that what's in our control is how we can change things ourselves if we definitely get it and actually attend to it and do something with it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Very good. So tell me, Patrick, a little bit. We've given you quite a bit of an introduction there around your background. Is there anything else you might want to share with our listeners about your background?
You know what? I'm left-handed. I march to the tune of my own drum. When my parents were young, my father was a school teacher. My mother was a nurse. I was the fourth of 5 children, and they were poor on money, but they were wealthy on love. And I think I had the greatest childhood ever. And my mom and dad always taught me that I can do anything in the world that I want as long as I'm willing to work hard enough at it. So I was never given anything, like any handout or any gift or any large sums of money. I had to, as an underdog, earn everything myself. And so I've just kept that underdog mentality and that spirit with me of self-confidence and self-esteem. And I traced it back to my family roots. I had a blessing, a wonderful, loving family. And I'm so grateful. And to this day, I still think of all the things that I learned from my father, who passed 5 years ago. And I'm just blown away as to what I learned from him. Not so much about what he said, but what he did. But yeah, I think that's more about my background.
Excellent. And what a wonderful way to be brought up and given us the sense of, for you can have what you want, you can succeed in what you want to do, but you're going to have to work for it. And I think that's a great way to be brought up. And I think that sense of things, and that was my upbringing as well, where mum and dad were working long hours in cafes and so forth. And even after school, we were there at the cafe at a young age, school holidays, weekends. But I don't know about you, but I think for me, and this could be relevant for you, it taught me about work ethic. And could you resonate with that?
I think my mother in the 8th grade, she said, Patrick, I'm working the afternoon shift at the hospital. She worked in the nursery helping deliver babies and care for babies. And she said, I don't have time to do your laundry anymore. So this is how you use a washing machine and this is how you use a dryer. So if you want clean clothes, and it's okay to wear your dirty clothes, but if you want clean clothes, then this is how you use the washer and dryer. And so I learned how to care for my clothing at an early age. And then they wouldn't give me any money. They gave me lunch money. And the way that I earned my lunch money was by doing chores. And so I learned at a very young age. I started shoveling snow in the winter to make money, to pay for what I wanted. I soon started delivering newspaper deliveries for the USA Today and also the Detroit Free Press. And then after doing that, maybe it was in the 8th grade, I started selling Detroit Free Press subscriptions door to door. And I remember, like in 1983, making $80, $90, $100 per night US just selling Detroit Free Press subscriptions. I'd make a $1, I get on a Sunday subscription, I get a $1 commission. On a daily, I'd get a $2. And if I sold somebody a daily and a Sunday, I got a $3 commission. So I did that for about a year and I made tons of extra money. And then my grade 10 in high school, I went to work at a restaurant and they paid me $3.35 an hour, which was minimum wage back then.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, I'm trading an hour of my time for $3.35. And when I went knocking door to door selling newspaper subscriptions, I'd make $50, $60 an hour. And so at that point, I learned that to create wealth, you did it by being a business owner, a sales professional, an entrepreneur, not working for the man and trading time for dollar. So that was a great lesson I learned early on in life.
Oh, that's awesome. Fantastic lessons in that. Yeah. And so how did you get into leadership?
I've never really viewed myself as someone trying to become a leader or someone who's looking behind me to find out who is following me, because I could care less if people are following me or not. And there's a lot of leaders out there that are constantly counting their fans. They want to know how many fans they have, how many followers they have on social media. I could care less about any of that. That means nothing to me. But I think it started for me as an athlete playing youth sports. I played American football, basketball, tennis, baseball. And some of my coaches, they pushed me harder than ever. And I'm like, wait a minute, why are you making me run harder than everybody else? Why? And they're like, you're the captain of the team. And as the captain, you got to be in the best shape. And we're going to push you harder than everybody. And you can take it. And these other kids can't take it. And so for me, leadership got started in youth sports. I was pretty much always the captain of every team. And maybe it's because I'm full of passion. Maybe because I never give up. Maybe because I prepare and I'm mentally strong in a good way. I'm full of zest and zeal for life. And I think people just followed me athletically, and that kind of led me down this path in personal growth and development. So am I a leader? I think I'm a leader of my own life. I'm a huge fan of self-leadership, but I've not been one that's worked for the big Fortune 500 company and had an organizational development chart where I had 200 people report to me. I've always been the guy, you know what? I can do it better than these guys. I don't need this day job. I quit my job 18 years ago to be a full-time entrepreneur. And maybe it's because I'm unemployable, because the people that were always my bosses or my superiors, I looked at them and who are they? I can do it better myself. So from a leader, I think my skill set is based on self-leadership, discipline, and that people will naturally follow that. But I don't have the background of being like a vice president of sales and having 500 employees follow me. That doesn't interest me at all.
No, what you're talking about is a title. That's leadership is, you're a leader in the industry. You're a leader as a coach, as a mentor, as a speaker. You're a leader in that industry, right? What you're talking about is being a vice president. That's a title. There's so many vice presidents, people I know with those titles, they're managers. They're not real leaders. So what you have done and what you continue to do in the industry is leadership, and you're leading from the front.
You bring up a good point. I remember after I graduated from University of Montana, I was in corporate sales in Seattle for many years. And I had this idea. I gave 300 speeches and I couldn't get paid to save my life. I got free breakfast, and free lunch, and free dinner, free pens, and free mug. And finally, being a Christian, I had to come to Jesus talk and say, what am I doing wrong here? Why can't I make it in this industry? And the answer I got back was, if you want what others have, you must do what others have done, and you'll get what others have gotten. And so I looked at my mentors, people like Les Brown and Zig Ziglar and Brian Tracy and Dr. Stephen Covey and Wayne Dyer and Deepak Chopra, Tony Robbins. And they all had successfully written and published a book. So I was at a crossroads in my life, and I was either A, going to go back to school and get a master's in business administration or get an MBA, or I was going to write a book. And I remember that crux of that decision, which do I do? What do I do? And I wanted to speak and speak. And so finally I decided, you know what? If I go get an MBA and get an advanced degree, I'm still reliant on having an organization hire me so I can earn a paycheck to provide for my family. But if I go learn how to fish for myself as an author, as a speaker, as an entrepreneur, then I'll never have to work another day of my life. And the reason why I say this, and I certainly don't want to knock anybody with higher education, because I believe education is one of the greatest investments that we can make. But I can't tell you how many people I've known over the years that are 30, 40, 50 years old, and they have these PhDs and MBAs, and they come to me like, Patrick, what do you know that I can get a job? I just got laid off. I'm struggling. I don't know what to do. I don't have an income source. And my answer is, I don't know. I haven't worked in 18 years. What are you talking about? But the point of it is, a lot of people in academia, they never learn how to fish for themselves. So they're reliant on the organization to provide them fish on payday. And I think that's a dangerous trap to get into. So your point on leadership, I think leadership is about your ability to provide for your family and your loved ones without being dependent on the success of an organization. So that's a good point you brought up.
Awesome. Beautiful. Just love the way that you've actually shared that as well in that story too. So yeah, write a book. That will get you out there, which is one great thing to do. We're going to an MBA, totally up to you. Nothing wrong being in academia and also writing things and getting those degrees. It's what you do with it. It's how you go about with things as well, which is interesting.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.